On the morning of February 26, 1959, searchers climbed a frozen slope in the northern Urals and found a tent half buried in snow. It had been slashed open from the inside. 9 experienced hikers were gone, and their boots were still in the tent. They came from the Ural Polytechnical Institute in Sverdlovsk. Most were students or recent graduates in their early 20s, engineers, athletes, veterans of the trail. In late January 1959, they set out for a winter trek rated at the highest difficulty of the day. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, 23, a radio engineer who built his own equipment for the mountains. The group numbered 10. Their goal was Otorten, a remote peak deep in Mansi hunting country. They rode the rails north to Ivdel, then a truck to the logging village of Vijay, the last inhabited place on the route. From there, they would ski west into the wilderness toward Otorten, across the slopes of a mountain the native Mansi called Kholat Syakhl. On January 28th, one member turned back. Yuri Yudin, plagued by joint pain, said goodbye at an abandoned settlement and returned home. It was a decision that saved his life. The remaining 9 skied on into the snow. Yudin would carry the parting for the rest of his life.
If I had a chance to ask God just one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night?
The hikers kept diaries and photographs, developed later from film found on the mountain. The images show a cheerful, disciplined group breaking trail through deep drifts, hauling heavy packs, laughing in the cold. Nothing in them suggests fear. On February 1st, the group typed a joke newsletter they called the Evening Otorten. Its lead item read,
"From now on, we know that snowmen exist."
That afternoon, they climbed onto the exposed eastern shoulder of Kholat Syakhl. Rather than descend to shelter in the forest, they pitched their tent on the open slope, cutting a platform into the snow. It was their last photograph, a figure digging in as the light failed. Kholat Syakhl means, in the Mansi tongue, dead mountain. That night, the temperature fell toward minus 25 degrees Celsius. A hard wind scoured the ridge. Sometime in the dark, something drove all 9 out of the tent. Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram from Vijay by February 12th. When no word came, families and the institute grew alarmed. On February 20th, a rescue expedition of students, soldiers, and Mansi trackers set out to find them. 6 days later, searcher Mikhail Ravine spotted the tent on the slope of Dead Mountain. It stood half collapsed and empty. The fabric had been cut open from the inside. Ravine later described what they found.
The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty. All of the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind.
Leading away from the tent were footprints, some bare, some in socks, none in boots. 8 or 9 sets marched in an orderly line down toward the tree line, half a mile below. Whatever happened, they had not run in scattered panic. They had walked. At the edge of the forest stood a tall cedar. Beneath it were the remains of a small fire. And the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko, both were stripped to their underwear. Branches on the cedar were broken as high as 5 meters up. Between the cedar and the tent lay 3 more, Igor Dyatlov, Rustem Slobodin, and Zinaida Kolmogorova. They were found facing back uphill, toward the tent, as if trying to return. All 3 had died of hypothermia in the snow. They had frozen to death climbing back toward the shelter they had fled. Four hikers were still missing. They were not found until May, when the snow melted, buried in a ravine deep in the forest beneath 4 meters of pack. There, the investigation turned strange. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had a fractured skull. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubinina had crushed chests, ribs broken on both sides. Dubinina's tongue and eyes were missing, yet their skin bore almost no external wounds. The medical examiner, Boris Vozrojdeny, testified that no human blow could account for the injuries.
Such an injury could be the result of a force equal to a car crash. It was as if the person had been struck by a moving vehicle.
Then came the finding that fueled decades of rumor. A radiological test of the clothing recovered from the ravine detected elevated levels of radioactivity, traces that had no obvious source on a hiking expedition. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, closed the case in late May 1959. He could name no attacker, no accident, no clear chain of events. Instead, he reached for a phrase that has haunted the story ever since. The official conclusion read,
"The cause of the hikers' deaths was a compelling natural force which the people were not able to overcome."
The file was stamped secret and sealed in an archive. The area was closed to hikers for 3 years. To grieving families, the verdict explained nothing. It only named the mystery and locked the door on it. In the silence that followed, theories multiplied. Some blamed the Mansi people, though the trackers were quickly cleared. Others spoke of secret weapons tests, of escaped prisoners, of infrasound driving the group to panic, and, inevitably, of the strange lights seen in the sky that winter. Decades later, Ivanov himself broke from the official line and pointed to those lights.
"I am almost sure now that those bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death."
In 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the investigation. After field expeditions and modeling, they rejected the exotic theories. In 2020, lead investigator Andrei Kuryakov announced their finding: an avalanche. Kuryakov described a desperate, disciplined retreat in the dark.
"It was a heroic struggle. There was no panic, but they had no chance to save themselves under those conditions."
In 2021, scientists in Switzerland offered a mechanism. Their models showed that the cut they made into the slope could have released a small, delayed slab of hard snow, heavy enough to crush a chest or a skull, yet leaving little trace before it dispersed. It fit the strange injuries with unsettling precision. By this account, the slab struck in the night. The injured were dragged toward the forest. At the cedar, they built a fire, then froze one by one as they tried to climb back. The radiation, the missing tongue, the reddish skin, all explained by scavenging animals' decay and camp lantern parts. To many, it was convincing. To others, it was one theory among many. Yuri Yudin, the man who turned back, never accepted the closed cases. He identified his friends' belongings, attended their funerals, and spent the rest of his life gathering documents. He died in 2013 and was buried among them, in Yekaterinburg. On the pass today stands a stone memorial to the 9 who never came home. The mountain keeps its old Mansi name, Dead Mountain, and around it the winter wind still moves the snow. Perhaps a slab of snow in the dark answers everything. Perhaps it does not. The evidence has been weighed for more than 60 years, and still it leaves a gap the size of the question Yudin carried to his grave. What really happened that night? 9 skilled travelers walked into the snow and never explained why. If this account moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, so these stories and the people in them are not forgotten.